Alright, so there's no turning back now. Got the hole cut. Size of the hole is, let's see what the hole saw here. This is 2 1/8. That's what the template here. See, is this the English one? No, this is the Spanish one. Anyway, gives you the template where how to lay out the markings on the door, the spacing for your center line for your bolt, and the hole for the actual lock itself. So it calls for the door to be at least 1 1/8 thick, or inch and 5/8. I just measured the inside, and this is just a little bit more than 1.5 inches. So it's going to be close, but I think I can still make it work. So there's the pile of parts. I'll go ahead and cut the hole for the locking mechanism. I'll spare you the details on that. Okay, so we got the deadbolt, the lock key set hole cut, and the deadbolt hole cut. This was a 1-inch hole. I thought it was smaller than that, but it's got to be big enough to take the locking mechanism. I got the lock put in and ran into a bit of an issue. I couldn't, it was jamming up, it wouldn't unlock. So in the instructions it talks about calibrating the lock or making sure that it's set right when you install it. What I'm going to try to do, you know, who needs instructions? I just threw those away. So the locking mechanism, this is in the locked position when it's horizontal, and it won't turn clockwise anymore. The deadbolt with the bolt extended is locked. You'll see there's kind of a little cross or a plus sign there. That's where the pin that turns the lock, that's where that goes. The lock itself, oriented in the correct position, this piece here, I thought it spun freely, but it doesn't. It actually has a limit to it. So there's one way, and there is the other way. Turning it clockwise, making sure that it's pretty much up and down, it'll fit into here, and it'll orientate properly with the other locking mechanism. So what was happening was, I had it like this, and when I was trying to unlock the door, it was only turning just a little bit more, and then it was reaching its limit and it wouldn't unlock. So it has to be in the proper orientation depending on how your bolt is set. So we're going to try it that way and put everything back together. Okay, so we got the lock face in, the deadbolt in, and we orientated this just as I spoke a minute ago. And you can kind of test it out. You can see now it works freely. So had I done that before, I would have realized that the lock was going to jam when I put the back plate on. So let me put the rest of it together and we'll be back here in just a second. Okay, so we got the face plate in, got the backing plate in, and the deadbolt. Still works, so we're on the right track here. You can see this has got a proper orientation, and so does the deadbolt. This crosshair piece inside the deadbolt is more towards the bottom of the mechanism than the top. That goes to the bottom. It's actually got a label on the other side that says up, just like this does, says up. So we got a shadow here. Yeah, there's a little bit of a shadow. As far as this locking plate, it's got a recessed portion here that goes inside the hole that you cut, and it fits inside that hole perfectly, so it'll kind of center itself for the most part. You just kind of have to give the final adjustment. These two screw holes are what the back of the locking mechanism inside here. It has two screw holes, so they go inside. They fit the inside of these, so go ahead and put that on. Okay, so the final installation is done. Got the face plate on here. You can hit the button here, and it locks. I'm having a little bit of an issue with this lock. Not exactly sure what the problem is. Let me take you inside here. Okay, so we're inside. I'm going to keep the door cracked a little bit here for lighting purposes, but the deadbolt throw, the knob here, doesn't seem like it wants to travel completely. Like that straight up and down, that would be unlocked. And as the motor kicks in, it'll bring it, that would be the full throw, but it brings it to right about there, about 3/4 of the way. Turns out it was binding up a little bit because this install is different than it would be residential. So you see, it wants to lock. It automatically locks. So for that reason, what happened was, if you see how this metal plate sticks out on a residential install, this would be recessed into the door. You would chisel out a section in the door frame or door edge, and that would sit inside. So that throws off the measurements by 1/8 of an inch or so. There's a metal plate, and I'll get the instructions and I'll show you, but there's a metal plate that this attaches to. It fits inside the hole of the door, and 2 screws go through that plate into the locking mechanism on the outside. And the metal pin, as it comes through, was being pulled towards the edge of the door because this locking mechanism isn't recessed. So when I installed this, it was trying to bring everything back in line with the measurements according to the manufacturer. So what that's doing, when the lock was trying to lock, it was binding up when it got to a certain point and wouldn't let the lock function properly. So I had to go in and modify that plate, and I'll point out in the instructions where I did that. I used a Dremel tool and a grinder. So this was the mounting plate that I had to modify. I also took the grinder, it's a Dremel tool with a grinder tip, and I wobbled out the leading edge of this hole to allow the difference in the striker plate, or the lock plate there. But what happened was, you can see this has a recess to it, and that lines up with the hole here. So what happened was, there's where this there you can see that little fine little screw hole right there. That's not threaded or anything. What it does is it allows this screw to pass through, and then it goes through the lock and then into the faceplate. And what was happening was, because the locking mechanism was sticking out of the door by 1/8 of an inch or so, give or take a little bit, when the main pin came through the center and grabbed the lock, which is, let me get the focus here, you see this metal pin that comes through that's got the lines in it? It passes through that plus mark in the center of that lock. Well, if the lock is over by 1/8 of an inch, it's not coming through straight. It's not lined up from here to the main brain box that's on the inside. So when the brain box tries to turn counterclockwise or clockwise to open or close the lock, it was reaching a binding up point, and that wouldn't allow this to function properly and move the pin in and out. So what I did is I used the grinder, and on the back side of this plate, just like there's a recess here, there's a little knob that sticks out that's cast into the metal that allows for the screw to pass through that hole. And that metal piece was hitting the corner of the locking mechanism, and it was throwing the plate off a little bit. So to make up that difference, I just ground the edge of that nipple off on the back side of this, and that allowed this metal plate to shift and had some play in it. So that allowed me to move the plate over to line up with where the lock was now, because it's not mounted in a wooden door, it's mounted in a metal frame door on an RV. So that took care of the binding issue. The lock functions fine now, there's no issue. So now, let me get my phone here and I'll cycle the lock here for you. So it's connecting, it's showing the door is locked, and it is. The pin just went out, so you hit the button. I'll show you the door lock there. It gives you a little green light when it's locked, and a little green light when it's unlocked. So you can also see it's unlocked now. You can also activate the lock by hitting the Ultraloq button there at the bottom, where you can punch in your code, and then when you hit your code and then hit this, that'll unlock it. So you can lock it by turning the deadbolt, or you can, it'll time out. I set mine, I think, to 3 minutes, and it'll lock again on its own. We'll bring this out so you can see. Door is open. Door is locked. This app has some other pretty neat features as well. While I got this here, it'll show you the users who you've got programmed in, and it'll also show you the schedule as far as how the lock was accessed and by what means, whether it was manual, be it via the app or the push code or whatever. It'll tell you what the time and the date when that was accessed. There's also an emergency key. I guess let me go back outside and I'll show you the emergency key access. I don't have my keys on me, but I can show you how you get to it. So there's two emergency bits to this. One, you can access this. I pointed that out earlier. That's just a little rubber flap. It allows you to plug in a micro USB to power the lock. Or if you want to access with the emergency key, or it's just a standard key, just pull up a little bit on the bottom and the top folds down, and there's the key mechanism. And that just resecures. It also has a fingerprint, which I haven't set up yet, but from what I understand, the fingerprint is pretty accurate and sensitive, so maybe we'll do that, maybe we won't, I don't know, don't really need it. But so that's the install. We'll see how it holds up, and I'll give you like maybe a 6-month or 1-year review, or if there's any problems I'll come back sooner than that. So anyway, thanks for watching. See you on the next video.